She was the shadow they walked past every day, until one algorithm changed everything forever. Amara Wilson had perfected the art of invisibility. In the sterile corridors of TechFlow Solutions, she moved like morning mist, present but unnoticed, essential but unacknowledged. Her janitor's cart squeaked against polished marble floors, the sound blending into the corporate symphony of clicking keyboards and hushed phone calls. The smell of industrial disinfectant clung to her uniform, a blue polyester barrier that rendered her transparent to the eyes that mattered. She cleaned around them as they debated the future of artificial intelligence, their voices rising and falling like ocean waves over her bent figure. Stock options, venture capital, disruption. The words floated above her head while she scrubbed coffee stains from conference tables where million-dollar decisions were made. Her MIT computer science degree, folded carefully in her studio apartment drawer, might as well have been written in invisible ink. The worst part wasn't the work itself. It was the way they looked through her, or rather, didn't look at all. A casual thanks thrown over a shoulder, eyes that slid past her face like water off glass. The security guard who checked her bag twice while waving through men in $1,000 suits. The receptionist who spoke slower when Amara asked about building hours, as if poverty had somehow damaged her hearing. But Amara had learned to swallow fire and call it breakfast. Every dismissive glance fueled the late-night coding sessions in her cramped apartment, where she transformed pain into algorithms and frustration into breakthrough innovations. Her fingers flew across a second-hand laptop, building digital castles while the world slept. The San Francisco Tech Innovation Conference buzzed with the electricity of ambition and venture capital. Glass towers reflected the afternoon sun, casting sharp shadows across the convention center where the industry's elite gathered to reshape tomorrow. Amara had saved for months to afford the basic attendee pass. Her janitor's salary stretched thin by the dream of being seen, just once, as more than invisible hands that cleaned their messes. She stood in the networking lounge, her best thrift store blazer carefully pressed, holding a cup of complimentary coffee that burned her palm through the thin paper. Around her, conversations flowed in streams of technical jargon and casual arrogance. She recognized faces from magazine covers, voices from TED Talks, the architects of the digital age who had never noticed her dusting their portraits. James Lawson entered like gravity had shifted to accommodate him. Founder and CEO of Apex AI, the man whose neural networks powered half the internet, whose company's valuation had crossed into the stratosphere. His presence commanded the room. Conversations paused, phones emerged for surreptitious photos, the crowd rearranged itself around his magnetic field of success. Amara had cleaned his office building, had emptied his trash, polished his conference table, vacuumed around his sleeping form during those legendary all-night coding marathons. She knew the brand of his coffee, the way he arranged his monitors, the stack of patents that bore his company's name. What she didn't know was that one of those patents belonged to her. Seeing him here, surrounded by admirers and sycophants, something stirred in her chest. Not hope exactly, but a cousin of hope, the kind that whispers maybe, just maybe, today would be different. She approached with the careful steps of someone accustomed to rejection, her hand extended in the universal gesture of professional greeting. "Mr. Lawson," she said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart, "I'm Amara Wilson. I've been following your work on predictive algorithms, and I'd love to discuss some ideas I've been developing." He turned toward her with the lazy attention of someone interrupted by an insect. His eyes performed a quick scan. Cheap blazer, unfamiliar face, the subtle markers that screamed, "not important," and his expression shifted from neutral to mildly annoyed. The hand she had extended hung in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice carrying the particular brand of condescension reserved for the obviously inferior. "But I don't shake hands with random attendees. Security should have kept the general admission folks in the back sections." The words hit her like cold water, each syllable a small violence. Around them, conversations dimmed as heads turned to witness the public execution of someone who had dared to reach above her station. She felt the familiar heat of shame crawl up her neck, the old wounds reopening with surgical precision. "I understand," she managed, lowering her hand with as much dignity as she could gather. "I just thought—" "Look," Lawson interrupted, his attention already drifting toward someone more worthy of his time. "I'm sure you mean well, but innovation happens at a certain level. Maybe try the community college workshops they hold downtown." Laughter rippled through the nearby crowd. Not cruel exactly, but dismissive in the way that cut deeper than cruelty. Someone whispered, "Diversity hire," just loud enough to be heard. Another voice murmured something about participation trophies. Amara felt her soul contract into a dense, burning core of humiliation. She walked away on unsteady legs, past booths displaying the future, past conversations about changing the world, past mirrors that reflected her own inadequacy back at her in high definition. In the bathroom, she locked herself in a stall and let the tears come. Hot, angry tears that tasted like 3 years of night school, like every algorithm she'd ever written in solitude, like every dream deferred by the color of her skin and the poverty of her circumstances. Dr. Rebecca Chen had built her reputation on seeing what others missed. As Chief Technology Officer at Neural Dynamics, she had survived 2 decades in Silicon Valley by developing an almost supernatural ability to spot genuine innovation buried beneath corporate politics and social prejudice. She had been watching the interaction between Lawson and the young woman with the careful attention of a predator studying prey. Something about the woman's bearing, the specific way she had articulated her interest in predictive algorithms, had triggered Chen's finely tuned instincts. She found Amara in the hallway outside the restrooms, still trembling with the aftershocks of public humiliation. "Excuse me," Chen said softly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Lawson. You mentioned predictive algorithms." Amara looked up, wariness written across her features like a language she had learned too well. "Yes," she said carefully, "but I'm not sure it matters anymore." "Everything matters," Chen replied, extending her hand in the gesture Lawson had refused. "I'm Rebecca Chen, and I'd very much like to hear about your work." They found a quiet corner away from the main conference flow, 2 folding chairs beside a display of outdated networking equipment. Chen listened as Amara spoke, her voice gaining strength with each technical detail, her eyes brightening as she described the breakthrough that had consumed her nights for the past 3 years. "I call it Smart Predict," Amara explained, her hands moving as she painted invisible architectures in the air. "Traditional machine learning models can forecast user behavior with about 60% accuracy. Mine achieves 93% by incorporating what I call shadow variables, data points that seem irrelevant but actually predict behavior better than obvious metrics." Chen felt her pulse quicken. She had seen thousands of pitches, evaluated countless innovations, but this was different. This was the kind of breakthrough that redefined industries, the mathematical equivalent of discovering fire. "Have you published this work?" Chen asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "I've tried," Amara said, her voice carrying the weight of 17 rejections. "No one wants to hear from a janitor with ideas above her station. I have 3 patents pending, but the application process—" She shrugged, the gesture encompassing a world of bureaucratic barriers and financial impossibilities. Chen pulled out her phone and began typing. Within minutes, she had confirmed what she suspected. Patent application number US20210345678, method and system for multidimensional behavioral prediction using shadow variable analysis, filed by Amara Wilson 3 years prior, approved 6 months ago. Currently licensed exclusively to Apex AI. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. Lawson's crown jewel, the algorithm that had made him famous, that powered his company's most profitable products, that he had personally presented at conferences around the world, it belonged to the woman he had just publicly dismissed as unworthy of. A handshake. "Amara," Chen said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of impending earthquake. "I need to ask you something very important. This algorithm you've developed, did you ever approach Apex AI directly?" 18 months ago, Amara replied, the memory still fresh enough to sting. "I managed to get a meeting with their head of acquisitions. He looked at my presentation for maybe 5 minutes before telling me they weren't interested in amateur-hour mathematics, said I should stick to cleaning up after real innovators." Chen's phone buzzed with a Google alert she had set up years ago. A tech journalist named Marcus Rivera had been investigating the murky world of patent acquisitions, following paper trails that led from brilliant innovations to corporate bank accounts. His latest article, published just hours ago, bore a headline that would change everything: "The Hidden Genius Behind Apex AI's Billion-Dollar Algorithm." Rivera had done his homework. Corporate filings, patent records, interview transcripts. He had assembled a forensic accounting of intellectual theft that read like a thriller novel. The algorithm Lawson had built his empire on wasn't his creation. It had been developed by a night shift janitor who cleaned the very offices where it was being implemented. The story went viral with the speed of digital wildfire. Twitter exploded with hashtags #Justice for Amara, #Apex lied, #Innovation theft. Tech blogs scrambled to verify the facts, finding them disturbingly accurate. Reddit detectives began excavating every patent filing, every conference presentation, every interview where Lawson had claimed credit for revolutionary work that wasn't his. Apex AI's stock price began to hemorrhage value like a severed artery. In the first hour after Rivera's article went live, the company lost $800 million in market capitalization. By market close, the damage had exceeded $2 billion. Investors demanded explanations. Board members called emergency meetings. The media circus gathered with the hungry intensity of sharks detecting blood in the water. Lawson's initial response was predictably tone-deaf, a statement claiming the allegations were baseless attacks by disgruntled individuals seeking attention. He doubled down on his ownership of the innovation, threatening legal action against those spreading falsehoods about our intellectual property. But the evidence was mathematical in its precision. Rivera had obtained emails between Apex AI executives discussing their acquisition of a small analytics firm that had been using some interesting predictive models. The firm had licensed Amara's patent without her knowledge, buried the ETH transaction in a maze of subsidiary companies, then sold the rights to Apex for a fraction of their true value. Amara's phone buzzed with calls from reporters, lawyers, venture capitalists who suddenly remembered her name. The same people who had walked past her for years now wanted exclusive interviews, photo opportunities, the chance to be associated with the story that was reshaping Silicon Valley's understanding of innovation and ownership. She hired Sarah Kim, a patent attorney who specialized in intellectual property theft cases involving underrepresented inventors. Kim's first act was to file a lawsuit seeking damages in excess of $1 billion, a figure that represented a conservative estimate of the revenue Apex AI had generated using Amara's stolen work. The depositions were brutal theater. Lawson, under oath, struggled to explain technical details of his algorithm that he had clearly never understood. When Kim asked him to derive the mathematical foundation of SmartPredict's shadow variable analysis, he fumbled through explanations that would have embarrassed a first-year computer science student. The contrast was devastating when Amara took the stand. She spoke about her algorithm with the fluent precision of someone who had birthed each line of code, who understood every mathematical relationship, who could explain not just how it worked, but why each component was necessary. Her testimony was a masterclass in machine learning theory, delivered by someone who had been dismissed as intellectually inferior. The settlement came on a Tuesday morning that felt like the dawn of a new age. Apex AI agreed to pay Amara $1.2 billion in damages, acknowledge her as the true inventor of SmartPredict, and fund a scholarship program for underrepresented inventors. Lawson resigned in disgrace, his reputation destroyed by the very arrogance that had built his empire. But money, Amara discovered, was just the beginning. She used her settlement to launch the Invisible Innovators Foundation, an incubator designed to identify and support brilliant minds that traditional venture capital overlooked. Her first cohort included a formerly homeless programmer who had developed a revolutionary encryption method, a transgender mathematician whose optimization algorithms were solving supply chain problems, and a deaf engineer whose sign language processing work was advancing human-computer interaction. The foundation's headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown San Francisco building, its walls lined with patents and prototypes from inventors who had been told they didn't belong in the innovation economy. Amara kept her old janitor's uniform in a glass case in the lobby, not as a reminder of shame, but as a testament to the genius that hides in plain sight. 6 months after the settlement, she stood before a packed auditorium at the same conference where Lawson had refused her handshake. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The keynote speaker was the woman they had once dismissed as unworthy of basic courtesy. Innovation, she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd, doesn't wear expensive suits or carry prestigious degrees. It doesn't come from corner offices or exclusive networks. Innovation comes from need, from hunger, from the desperate desire to solve problems that matter. She paused, letting her eyes sweep across faces that now looked at her with the attention they should have paid years earlier. When you passed me in the hallways, when you looked through me as if I were invisible, I was already changing your world. The algorithms predicting your next purchase, optimizing your supply chains, protecting your data, they came from late nights in a studio apartment, from a mind you decided wasn't worth your time. The applause began slowly, tentatively, then built into something approaching thunder. People rose from their seats, some with tears in their eyes, others with the uncomfortable recognition of their own blindness. It was the sound of an industry confronting its own prejudices, acknowledging the talent it had systematically ignored. Lawson himself sat in the back row, his presence a testament to either remarkable courage or staggering tone deafness. When the applause finally died, he stood and walked toward the stage with the careful steps of someone approaching an execution. "Ms. Wilson," he said, his voice carrying through the microphone someone handed him, "I owe you an apology that goes beyond words. I was wrong, not just about you, but about what innovation looks like, where it comes from, and who deserves our respect." He paused, the weight of public humiliation visible in the set of his shoulders. "I've spent my career talking about disruption while being disrupted by my own ignorance. You were right there, creating the future I claimed to be building, and I was too blind to see it." The moment stretched like held breath. Amara looked at him, this man who had embodied everything wrong with her industry, who had dismissed her genius as if it were static electricity, and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, but sadness for the innovation they all might have achieved if they had learned to truly see each other. "Thank you," she said simply, and meant it. The conference ended with the announcement of the Amara Wilson Center for Invisible Innovation, a research institute dedicated to identifying and nurturing talent in unexpected places. Tech companies pledged funding, universities offered partnerships, and a generation of young inventors finally had proof that genius doesn't come with predetermined packaging. On quiet evenings, Amara still worked late in her office, the city lights painting geometries across her window. She kept her old employee badge on her desk, the one that had granted her access to buildings where she was simultaneously essential and invisible. It reminded her that somewhere out there, another brilliant mind was being overlooked, another world-changing idea was being dismissed by people too comfortable with their assumptions to recognize revolution when it cleaned their offices. The future belonged to whoever was brave enough to see it first, and Amara Wilson had finally taught the world how to open its eyes. Remember this story when you walk past someone others have decided doesn't matter. Genius has no uniform, and innovation belongs to whoever dares to dream it into existence.